Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. You're probably thinking the next session has nothing to do with the BSA, with the building safety regulator, with anything we're doing. Mental health. When I did my MSc in facade engineering, I don't remember seeing mental health on the curriculum, right? Structural, thermal, but no mental health. I think we all know that would be wrong. It's got everything to do with what we do. It connects the people, our people, as we said this morning. Actually, it did come up this morning in the Mentimeter. I don't know if you saw it. What is the gateway to causing mental health? I can assure you that was not planned, but it is sad, actually, to see that on the screen. And so we're trying to do something different here, and I think we do have a duty to look after our people and to look beyond the actual discipline per se. And this is the topic of today, mental health. Last year, I was privileged to chair the last and conclusive panel discussion at ZAC, and I had the honor to have Billy Field on the panel, which right away, no surprise there, shocked me. The panel was about challenges in the industry, and Billy just went in and said the stress that it causes our team in tender, in design, the tight deadlines. One of the reasons why that shocked me, it is because it brought me back 30 years. When I started, I was under extreme pressure at work. I was thrown in. I would have sleepless nights, didn't sleep at all. Would go to work in the morning feeling sick, physically sick, and panic continued through the day. Repeat. At the end of the day, repeat. That, for me, ended up in me giving up my job. And I was lucky, because I could do that. And I swear to God, I said, I'm never going to work in the facade industry. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to have anything to do with windows and doors. So that went well. Okay, so that's what it means for me. I was very lucky, sadly, and I was sadly very lucky, and I'm here today to share this with you. But if I was one of the lucky ones, there are many people out there that have not been so lucky, and many people might have dealt with that in different manner, having different experiences, maybe even going different routes. So I hope that when Nick comes on stage and share his experience with stress at work, hopefully we can all take away something, go back to our workplaces and make them healthier and maybe help someone having a better day at work. Nick, do you want to come on stage? I'll let you introduce your topic. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick O'Shea. I'm a construction manager, a workshop facilitator, a podcaster, a mental health and wellbeing advocate. The list does go on. And I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about mental health in construction. Saverio reached out to me and said, could you come to this event today and share a little bit about your experience? And the first thing I thought of was coming up here and talking about the facts and the figures, but I think that's probably the issue with this industry, is it's always data focused and we forget about the human cost. If you work in construction, you're 3 times more likely to take your own life than somebody who doesn't work in the industry. We know that people suffer with stress, and I thought, what can I come up here today and talk about that hopefully people in the room will resonate with? So I thought I'd take you through a day in the life of a stressed out construction manager, because I'm sure we've all been there and we've all experienced this. So 5:30 a.m., the alarm goes off, your eyes are heavy, you haven't slept last night. The first thing you do before you leave the house is check your phone to check your emails, and somehow there's 30 unread emails from the night before that all seem to be urgent. 6:30 a.m. You arrive on site because you think this will give you an opportunity to get ahead of the day, only to find out that 6 of your other colleagues have done the exact same thing. That time that was supposed to be yours suddenly disappears. 8 a.m., the first crisis of the day. 6 lorries that were supposed to turn up throughout the day have all turned up at once. There's an angry lorry driver waiting outside shouting at you. There's a group of people that are ready for induction, which was agreed by your project manager, which you never said you was actually going to do, but it's somehow now your problem. The team are waiting for direction, but you've got no time to think, just react. 10:30, time for another coffee, definitely not time for breakfast, literally running on fumes. And I remember this point in the day used to be when my chest would get really tight. I'd start to think, God, this is going to be another horrible day, isn't it? But I've just got to get through because, that's what we always do. That's what the industry is about. You just crack on. 12:30 p.m., time for lunch. Unfortunately not. Time to grab a sandwich in between meetings, try and push through again. And I think that's a common theme in this industry. You're always told, just crack on. And, we've always been told that. 3 p.m., time for a site walk around, and I'd bump into various other managers, whether that be from the supply chain or from main contractors. And, occasionally people would say to me, Nick, this job's fucked, isn't it? And I'd go, I'd want to say no, but honestly, sometimes it was. And I think, again, as a leader in the industry, I felt like I had to just put a front on and I'd say, look, just push through. And I remember loads of times people saying things like, once the steel frame gets up, it would just be easy, don't worry. And you're all laughing because you know that isn't the case. That's when the facade starts and it goes really wrong. But 6 p.m., the day would finish, but not the work. I know I'd spend my journey home often speaking to directors and giving them updates on stuff that I've already updated them on via email, but they want to know on the phone. And start to think about, what am I going to be doing tomorrow? And it was that thing that Saverio spoke about. It wasn't planned. We didn't say that. We're both talking from experience. It was the end of the day, but actually the start of the workday. 7:30, it's a family dinner, and I'm there, but I'm not really there. It's a bit of a blur. My partner's asking me about how my day was, and I just unload onto her, and she doesn't want to hear it, but unfortunately, she does. And I mentioned at the start of the talk that I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And one of the ways that I used to cope with stress was drinking. So, 7:30, finished dinner, I've done my planning for the day, and I have a few beers just to take the edge off. And, it's 12:30 now. I haven't managed to switch off yet. I'm staring at the ceiling and just sitting here thinking about what am I going to do tomorrow? And that cycle just repeats, and it's something that I just couldn't really break free from. And I want to share with you a little bit about my story today and how I ended up here, because I know if I was to say over 3 years ago I'd be standing here to a room full of people in the industry talking about my battles with mental health and addiction, I would have laughed at you, and I would have left here probably and gone to the pub and had a few beers. But that isn't my story. I come from a huge Irish family, like 24 cousins. My dad's one of 5. We all work in the industry. And I remember being a young boy, and I remember sitting in the pub, 7 years old, watching my dad and my uncles all at the bar. And they'd be drinking this kind of like this golden nectar, this like really fizzy drink that looked beautiful in a crisp glass. And I never really fitted in anywhere when I was younger. I really, really felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. I felt like I was just being pushed into something that I didn't want to do, and I wanted to be loved. And I think when I saw my parents and my dad and my uncles drinking, it gave them a little bit of a softer touch. My dad grew up in a long time ago where mental health wasn't really a thing, and his upbringing was then pushed onto me. And I always wanted to hear the words, like, I love you, Nick, I'm proud of you. And what it was when he had a drink, those words come out. And I remember the first time that I drank, it was like a hug on the inside. Some people say like a cup of tea is like a hug on the inside, but for me, when I had my first alcoholic drink, it was that feeling, that warm, fuzzy feeling that I was longing for from my parents, really. And I didn't know it, but from the first time that I drank, I think I was hooked. I was in. And we went to the park. I think this will be reminiscent for most people. I used to get the bus to school, so my mum would give me a couple of pounds each day, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to get the bus. I'm going to save up the pounds, So we get to the end of the week, and you've got £10, and then you've got 3 friends, and we'd all say to each other, you tell your mum that I'm staying at your house, and I'll tell my mum that I'm staying at yours. And we'd wait on the street corner, and we'd wait for someone to walk past. And, oh, please, mate, can you just buy us like a couple beers, a pack of fags? You can even take two fags out of the pack if you want, buyer's rights and all that. And that was what we did. And we went to the park, and I just got so drunk, so quickly. And I didn't realize at the time, and it's through doing the work since getting sober and clean that I've realized that I was trying to escape reality. And that was just something that continued in my life, really. And, that started in school, and that then moved into college. And it was a recurring theme: get through the week, get to the weekend, and you can escape. Get through the week, get to the weekend. And, I said I come from a family full of people that work in construction, and my dad said to me, look, I'll get you a job working for a company called Clipvine, a logistics company in industry I'm sure you're all aware of. And he said, I'll get you that job, it gives you a good start. And I thought, fine. And when I sort of arrived in construction, it was more of the same. But, this time now I'm sort of got more money. I'm living at home. I can drink and, escape the weekend. And I'm surrounded by a lot of other people that feel the same. There's on-site culture is definitely not one that supports mental health and well-being. I think, there's a lot of toxic behavior on site. And I don't blame the construction industry for my problems. I take full accountability for my drug addiction and my alcoholism. But I do believe there's certain parts of the industry which don't help. We speak about stress quite a lot of the time. And, we're speaking about regulations today that are being brought in without the additional resource. And I think there's lots of issues around that. But to continue my story, I worked as a labourer for a little while, and my dad said, look, if you prove yourself, I'll get you an apprenticeship in construction management. So that's what I did. And I worked for various different companies over the year, and we have a saying in recovery called a geographical, which is basically you take your geographical location, you pick it up, and you move it somewhere else, but all of your shit follows you, unfortunately. And that's what happened to me. I moved from various different companies, and every time I said, I was working in one company, and I said, it's the team that I'm working with. It's all those people, They're dragging me out to the pub. They're the reason I'm drinking. And I picked up myself, and I moved to another company. And lo and behold, within a couple of weeks, I was around all the same people, doing all the exact same behaviours. And one day I had a light bulb moment. I realised it was London. It wasn't the companies, it was the location. So I picked myself up, and I live down in Brighton now, down by the seaside, and got a job in Horsham, a local town. And I thought, yes, this is the new start that I need. I had to drive to work, so it kind of defeated the object around having a drink on the train and all the rest of it. I thought, if I've got to drive to work, it'll be fine. And I haven't mentioned it much in here, but drugs are a big part of my life as well, specifically cocaine. And by this point, I was probably drinking and using drugs 4 or 5 nights a week, bare minimum. And I got to this new job. It was a really small company, so you get to know the directors. And I got 4 days clean and sober, and I thought, yeah, I've cracked it. Like, I'll be absolutely fine. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I'm feeling great. Like, I'm feeling a lot better. I think, I haven't drunk for this period of time, so it should be fine. And Friday comes around, and my boss says to me, look, we're working Saturday, the job's a bit behind, do you want to come in? And I said, yeah, do you know what? I think I will. It's the perfect excuse not to drink. Didn't say that to him, obviously, but that's what I was thinking. And that's what I did. And I started driving home, and I got a call from my friends, and they said, we're in the local social club. Do you fancy a couple of drinks? And I thought, yeah, actually, I deserve it. I've gone 4 days without it. I definitely can't have a problem. I think you know where this is going. I went for that drink on the Friday night, and Wednesday rolled around, and I just lost 4 or 5 days. And for me, one of the most beautiful things that's happened to me is I've realized that I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. And I talk about addiction and mental health, but that can manifest itself in many different ways. There's people in this room today that are probably struggling with their mental health, or they know someone who is, and it might not manifest itself in a drug and alcohol addiction, but it could be a work addiction, it could be a porn addiction, it could be a sex addiction, it could be anything. The list is endless. And I went in home on the Tuesday, and my partner was there, and she was, "What are you doing with your life?" And in between times, I've been texting my boss, first thing in the morning to say, I've got the runs, I can't come in. Next day, same thing, and got myself together. Walked back into the office on Wednesday, and when I walked in there was a box with all of my stuff on there and a note from my director saying, "Give me a call." Obviously, I'd only been with this company for a week, and it's the right thing to do. They said, "We're going to be terminating your contract immediately." And the only thing that stopped me from getting sacked before was I used to be able to hide it really well. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is there's so many people that are walking around hiding how they're feeling, because there's still a huge stigma in the industry that we work in. And I had my box of stuff, and I had to call my missus and say, "Look, I've been sacked." And she was like, "What? No shit, what do you expect?" And that just shows you where my head was at that point in my life. I felt hard done by. I felt like I shouldn't have been sacked, which is crazy looking back at it now. And most people would take that as a sign and as an opportunity to sort their lives out, but I took the total opposite, and I just went on self-destruct mode, really. And I was trying to kill myself, really, through drinking and drugs, but I was too scared to actually do it. I was feared up, and I went on a bit of a rampage for a little while, and I remember the date. It was the 9th of October 2022, and my brother-in-law rang me, and he said, "Look, we're a bit worried about you. What's going on?" And the only place he knew he could get me to was a pub, so he said, "Why don't you come to the pub?" And I thought, yeah, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. And I did, and we were playing a game of pool, and we were just talking, and I always used to order pints everywhere I went, pints of beer, never ordered bottles because I didn't see the logic. And for some reason on that day, I ordered a bottle of Peroni. I don't know why I did. And where we was drinking in the pub was just around the corner from where I was living before. I'd been kicked out of the house by this point. I was homeless, sofa surfing, really, and various random different people. And I had this bottle of Peroni, and I started drinking it. And I got like this much into it, and I just said to my brother-in-law, "I'm just going to go knock on Rachel's door, who's my partner." So I walked out the pub, up the high street, knocked on the door. And when I opened the door, there was a woman who I say saved my life today. She was Rachel's friend. She was sitting in the front room, and she was crying her eyes out. And I said to her, like, "What's going on? Why are you crying?" And she said, "I've just left my fiance because he's a drug addict and an alcoholic." And in that moment, I was like, "What the hell?" And when I walked into my house, there's a mirror on the right-hand side, and there's a sink on the left. And I turned right, and I looked in the mirror, and I had not recognized the person that I'd become. I just wasn't the same person that I was. I'd broken every single rule that I made. I said I would never, drink in mornings. I said I'd never drink in a week. I wouldn't do drugs unless it was the weekend. I'd never steal from anyone. I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't cheat. And, all of that stuff over the last 13, 14, 15 years, slowly but surely, that progression happened, and I just got worse and worse and worse. And when she said that, I looked at her, and I was like, "Oh, God." And then she looked at me and said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I thought, God, I don't know. I actually don't know. And I took what I had left of the bottle of Peroni, and I poured it down the sink. And I sat down, and I had a cup of tea with this woman, Aisha. And she started explaining to me all of the actions that her partner had done, and how it made her feel. And I was looking at my partner in the corner of my eye, and I could see just the destruction that I'd caused over the last years. And I committed to sobriety, and I guess that's how I ended up here today, talking to you guys about mental health and well-being in the construction industry. Because I got clean and sober, and started to think and see things differently. And I could see that, the industry is highly stressful industry, suffers a lot of people suffer with their mental health and addiction. And I just thought if I could share my story and help one person, then it'd be worthwhile. So why am I telling you this? And what does it have to do with construction? I was going to open it up to the room. Just shout. We won't bother bringing the mics around. But what are some of the challenges that we face in construction? We're all in the industry, so please shout. Don't be afraid. Deadlines, yeah. Pressure. What else? High expectations, yeah. What else? Commitment, did you say? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Other people who are stressed, yes. Yes. Was that one more? There. Emails, yeah. We should just throw the phones away, shouldn't we? I think. Time pressure, program, overworked. I think a lot of people in the industry are overworked, and I think there's a misconception around site and people in the office and people not understanding what they do. But just because you're not based on the site doesn't mean that you're not inundated with work. There's a lot of work to do. Audits, say I've got a family that worked in construction, and we're speaking about it today, having to prove everything that you're doing is becoming more and more the norm. Quality, we've got to ensure that the quality is right, but have we got the resource to do it? Depending on who I'm talking to, sometimes that says dickheads. Today it says difficult people. I've just said it now, but yeah. Design is constantly changing and evolving. It's a real difficult subject. Resources, I think, is one of the biggest issues. Labour issues, something from my experience, you end up being really stressed out over something that's totally out of your control. I need an instruction for that. That's something that's quite often said in the industry. Unrealistic timelines, making money, that's not in my scope. Long hours and weekend work. So, it didn't take much when I asked what are the challenges. Everybody knows that we've got challenges in this industry. But my agenda is around mental health, and I think awareness is great. Doing stuff like this today is brilliant. It will make people think about their own mental health and the mental health of their teams. I think it's time that we started to, take some action and start looking at mental health and well-being in the same way that we do safety and compliance. When something's not safe, we instantly stop. We come up with a new way of working and we start again. When something's not built right, we rip it down and we start again. But I don't think we are quite yet in the space that when somebody's mental health is in a bad state, that we stop, find out what the issue is, deal with it, and then move forward. The solution, I think we need to work together as an industry, no matter what part of the industry you work in, and roll out programs that are preventative rather than proactive and not reactive. So what does that look like? So the Hard Hat Reset is something that I want to roll out across the industry. Through my lens, it's a session where we can make it open and honest conversation and more relatable with storytelling. It could be someone like myself or other people within the industry sharing their stories. Breaking ground. So we're currently working with HealthMed, which are a company that are using AI to be able to actually give yourselves an audit on your company's health and well-being. I think if I was to ask you guys now, how well do you think your teams are doing, it would be a feeling rather than data. And I think, I said that at the start, data is not everything, but it gives us a baseline. So we want to come into companies and start that breaking ground process, in-person workshops, introducing practical coping strategies. You don't need lots of money and things to be able to start introducing good coping strategies. It doesn't have to be ice baths and saunas. There's some really easy, free ones that we can be doing. And we want to start building strength, implementing these daily practices. And from that breaking ground process, we can then implement those processes into leader development. So people who are in management roles aren't just thrown into them and not taught about this stuff, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges. Create communication frameworks and start to actually get support systems in place. And then securing legacy. What we don't want to do is come in, talk about stuff, and then leave. We want to set things up so that they can be moved forward and continue with them. So, self-governing communities, development of long-term structures, and implementing sustainable practices, because mental health can't be another thing that's added to somebody's role who's already flat out busy. So yeah, I will leave it there. There's a QR code on the screen. If you'd like to scan that, that takes you to all of the resources which I have. I've got podcasts, got wellbeing communities that you can join. So yeah, have a look, and if you like what you see, get in contact, and hopefully you can work with some of you guys in the future. So thank you for listening, and thank you again, Saverio, for asking me to come and talk.
Thank you very much. That was very powerful and emotional, and no, thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm not going to ask for questions or comments now, but I'm sure a lot of you will recognise a lot of the behaviours that Nick has spoken about, and instead of questions, I'm just going to ask you all to reflect on what Nick has said, and think about some of those strategies that we can all do to improve mental health in this industry. I think it's incredibly important, and thank you again, Nick, for sharing your story.
No worries. If anyone wants to talk, I'll be hanging around for lunch. So appreciate this is not really the most best environment, but if you want to come talk to me, please do.
Please do that. Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Cheers. No worries.